Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining me today and just being super patient as we work through some technical difficulties at the beginning here. We want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with me this morning. Today, we're going to be talking about food, but not in the way that feels complicated or expensive. We will be keeping it real, right? Keeping it practical, keeping our families in mind the entire time. As we know, many of the families in our communities, and we do have a few community members in our chat in our gathering today, which is amazing. They're doing so much with so little, right? So this presentation is designed with the reality up front and center. So every tip here that I'll be sharing is something that could be done on a budget, right? That's what I feel like is the best use of our time today. Okay, so let's start off talking a little bit about myself. My name is Amina. My name is Amina Francois. I'm one of the 4 care coordinators at Global Communities Healthy Start. My husband, my 4 daughters, and I, we all live in Temecula, and I provide support to pregnant and postpartum moms in San Bernardino County. So prior to my current role as a care coordinator, I supported parents with children ages birth to 3 as they navigated through the early intervention system as a service coordinator within the California Regional Center system. So I've been working with families for a while, and I did that for 17 years. In addition, I'm a full spectrum doula, a certified health and wellness coach, a lactation professional, and as I mentioned, a girl mom times 4. I'm passionate about birth, lactation, early childhood development, women's health, and herbalism. And as a busy mom, I know what it's like to feed a family healthy food, right? When time and money is tight. That's why I'm so passionate about making nutrition approachable for everyone, not just people with a whole foods budget, right? So everything that I'm sharing today is stuff that I actually live and use in my own home, and I share with the families that I connect with both personally and professionally. So let's go ahead and start with the big picture. So I pose the question of what does nutrition have to do with it? Right? Nutrition isn't just about weight or appearance. Nutrition touches every part of our health and our well-being. So let's walk through some of the aspects of our well-being that I have on the wheel today. So nutrition touches our hormones, right? It affects our energy levels, our menstrual health, our mood, our heart health, fertility, pregnancy. That includes our postpartum period. Weight management is also affected by our nutrition choices, bone health, and just our overall mental and emotional well-being. And so today, I'm going to share some 7 actionable tips for you. Just keeping in mind, again, that a lot of the families in our communities are dealing with high levels of stress, exhaustion, postpartum depression, other mood disorders, chronic conditions, all of which can be either positively or negatively affected by nutrition. What we help families understand about nutrition is also an extension of our holistic support that we provide to them. And so I'm not going to be sharing things in a way that should feel overwhelming, nothing that requires like a fancy grocery store or a dietitian. Okay. So I like to start these talks looking at what I consider healthful eating pillars. And these are things that I would love for families to keep in mind when they're making choices as often as possible, right? The first major pillar is the focus on whole foods, right? Consuming whole foods. These are foods that are as close to, the way you would see them um, naturally, come up naturally from the ground, and um, eating as close to that as possible. So limiting highly processed foods and prioritizing nutrient dense foods. Um, the other second pillar is healthy fats, right? Fats get a bad rap, but the reality is that they do support our brain, our nervous system, our hormone health, our skin health, nutrition. It helps having the proper amount of fat in our diet also helps us to absorb the nutrients that are in the foods, the other foods that we're eating. So we want to look at prioritizing healthy fats as often as possible. Some examples here on the screen, you'll see avocados, dark chocolate, fatty fish, nuts, and seeds. And then we have the pillar supporting hydration. Hydration, we have the first thing there, water, right? Which is the thing that we a lot of times will think about when we're talking about hydration. But hydration can be, or we can receive hydration through the other things that we consume on a daily basis. So herbal teas, there's an example of some beautiful sparkling water, juices, smoothies, soups. And when we're hydrated, we're supporting our hormone balance, right? Our digestion, our urinary tract health. Many of our families, especially moms who are breastfeeding, are chronically underhydrated. And we don't even understand that that could be connected to our mood and why we're not feeling, at optimal. And so I like to tell families that we want to aim at least 8 cups a day, right? But it is something that we need to be mindful of taking one step at a time. If you're not consuming a lot of fluid, we don't want to rush, right? And just go into drinking a bunch. This is about taking small actionable steps to get you to the goals. And as I mentioned, side note, right, underhydration, so veggies, fruits are high in water content, soups are great sources as well to consider when you're trying to stay hydrated, especially as we move soon into very high temperatures. The next healthy pillar is protein. Protein is super important throughout our lifespan. It supports growth, hair growth, our skin, the health of our skin, enzyme and hormone production, bone and muscle strength. And what I also like to say for those of us that might be vegan or that are looking to consider plant-based proteins to lower, because they are lower in cost, right? I like to also highlight during this time that there are plant-based proteins that do count, right? In terms of getting that daily protein in. And then the last pillar here is complex carbs and grains. That would be, carbs is another thing that in our society has gotten a bad rap. But as we go through this today, you'll see me highlight some of the very subtle differences that we, in some of the effects, right? In choosing a complex carb or a grain versus like a simple carb. Because carbs are essential for providing sustained energy, right? And it's because of the fiber and the nutrients in the carb. And we need that, right? As busy moms, we need to have fuel, right? Regular fuel throughout the day. And so when we talk about carbs, we really want to talk about, when at all possible, choosing something that is considered a complex carb, which would be, yes, to consider, it'll break down into a sugar in our body the same way simple carbs will, but complex carbs has friends. That's the way I like to talk about it, right? So those friends they're packaged along with fiber and fat or fat. So that's what you're getting when you're choosing one of the items in that pillar, such as oatmeal, such as corn, potatoes, squash, right? Vegetables, coconut, so versus, maybe, a bag of chips or candy, right? You're getting the carbs in those other scenarios, but you're getting what's considered simple carbs, right? They break down really quickly. They're associated with huge spikes and dips in our blood sugar, which again, thinking back to that pillar, we're having when we're having those highs and lows throughout the day, we're negatively affecting those different areas of our health, right? And so when we to choose a carb that has friends, right? We don't see those highs and those lows. We see more of a sustained use of and breakdown of the carb, which helps to support the things that we're doing on a daily basis, the things that we're doing that we know we're doing, and then the magical things that are happening inside of us as we go through our day. And so I like to, just explain to families the importance of choosing the complex carbs and grains as often as possible, because we want that slow and steady processing of the carbs, because life is a marathon, not a sprint, right? I do have, my three of my older girls are athletes, and they're absolutely important times for utilizing those quicker carbs. For that quick energy for your muscles, right? But unless we are out there running the 100, the 200, or playing an hour-long volleyball game, we want to utilize and fall back onto those complex carbs as often as possible. But in having these discussions with families, with that I support or that you come in contact with, just understand, this is a guiding principle for me, that families are doing the best that they can. And so our role, if you are here as a professional, is to meet them where they are, offer practical guidelines that respect their budget, right, their culture, and that celebrate small wins and small steps towards better health. I absolutely am against having people feel defeated when they finish talking to me, because life is hard enough, right? And we're just trying to do our best. And so I like to break this down in a way that helps them to feel empowered. And so that leads me to the next slide that I have here, but I have a question. Let's see. Oh, I love that. Thank you. I love that as well. So the next slide has what I consider a visual tool that I use often with families, and it's just in our own home as well, even with my daughters, to help them understand how to create balanced plates, right? And it's less about the plate, right? It could be a bowl, it could be, it's just the idea, right? Just to kind of visualize. If you were to put whatever you're preparing on a plate, what would that look like proportion-wise? Using this visual tool prevents us from having to calorie count and really embrace these restrictive diets that are out there, which can add undue stress to you, as the person who has to kind of keep up with everything. But then also very restrictive diets, thinking back to that wheel, right, with nutrition in the middle, a lot of times people feel like the less I eat, the healthier I am. That is not the case necessarily, right? Very restrictive diets have a negative impact on all those areas around that wheel. So that's why I like this idea of looking at the balanced plate. So let's look at the breakdown. So in general, right, when we are fueling ourselves with what I consider a balanced plate, that might look like half the plate being veggies and fruits, right? You're going to be getting a lot of nutrients, things with bright colors. I always tell the families that I work with, think about, going out to eat, right? Going out somewhere, right? You're going to get dressed. You're going to put on your best. Like, we want to be excited about the food that we're eating, right? And see nutrition or good nutrition, not as a punishment, but that something, that we get to enjoy. And so when we look at our plates, a great guide outside of just this balanced plate idea is just color, right? You want to have as many colors represented as possible. And so considering half of your plate, half of your bowl being filled with fruits and veggies, you are maximizing this opportunity to provide lots of vitamin nutrients and fiber to your body, right? And so you want to fill half the plate as often as possible with colorful vegetables and fruits. The more the color, the more nutrients we have here. Think dark leafy greens. That can be whatever your favorite dark leafy greens. It could be dandelion greens. It could be kale. It can be collard greens, mustard greens, carrots, tomatoes, berries, right? You can see the color. Think of the color in those foods. And then a quarter of the plate, you want to devote to some type of protein, right? A lean protein. That can be chicken, right? Eggs, fish, plant-based proteins such as beans, lentils, tofu, right? If you're having that, then you're on your way, right? These don't have to be expensive cuts of meat. So if you, in terms of chicken, right? Let's say it's a stretch for you to afford chicken breast. There's no need for you to feel bad about that. All you need to do is to consider the fact that chicken thighs offer us a little bit more fat, offer us a little bit more iron, and those are great ways to really look at this pursuit of optimal nutrition in a way that's a little bit more broad than what we see a lot of times in nutrition information that we're given. And then the last quarter of the plate, you want to devote to those whole grains. So things like brown rice, oats, whole wheat bread is a great example, corn tortillas. All those are budget-friendly options, and they're very filling. Okay. So when I start talking about whole grains, there's always a question of, or not a question, but a lot of times there's like I don't know about brown rice, right? So what I like to say during this portion of my talk is, challenge yourself, right? Challenge yourself with incorporating new grains. They're very affordable, shelf stable, which we'll get into a little bit later, a couple slides down. I encourage families to experiment, right? Maybe, you're used to having white rice, right? White rice is fine. But if you want to elevate, right, that experience in terms of nutrient profiles and vitamins and nutrients, then why not consider a half and half or a quarter brown rice thrown in with that white rice when you're making it, right? That way you can slowly incorporate that new texture into your diet, right? One thing about our diet, we are creatures of nature, right? So what we've always enjoyed, we will always enjoy. And so, but our palate can evolve as we grow and develop. So I encourage families to be open to trying different tweaks as they go through their meal planning and their day to day. And that's just an example of the guidance I give around incorporating more whole grains. And the reality is, for moms who are postpartum or breastfeeding, getting enough protein and vegetables isn't a luxury. It is essential, right? It supports recovery, milk production, energy, and mood. And so I hope today you'll take this plate visual, this balanced plate visual, and share it with your family and the families that you work with as a starting point. And the great thing about it, there's no math needed, right? It's a very easy concept to get across. And you don't need a perfect plate at every meal, right? It's about celebrating those small wins along the way. Even just moving towards this balance will make a real difference in the lives of our families. And so the second tip that I wanted to point out, because this is where we get stuck, right? When we sit through webinars or we're reading articles or books about nutrition. Then it comes down to, okay, how do I afford all of these things, right? Um, and so I like to include this in the training, which are some smart shopping strategies, because this is where often families get stuck. They want to eat healthier, but they feel like they can't afford it, right? And some of the fancy health foods, power foods that you see advertised online are quite pricey. But these strategies directly address this barrier. And so we're going to kind of go one by one. One of the best ways of saving when you're trying to eat well is planning your meals, right? Um, and that may look like the meal plan that you see on social media, right? Making a whole bunch of things on a Sunday to keep you sustained throughout the week. Or it might just be, right, going to your cupboard, opening it, looking at what you actually have on hand, right? And then looking at what you could buy to complement that meal, right? What could I use this can of beans, for example? How could I make a balanced plate using that? And adding to what you already have, right? Even a loose plan for the week prevents impulse buying and food waste. So I encourage families to always shop from their cupboards and their fridges and their freezers before going to the store. Because a lot of times you might just need that one or two items to complete that balanced meal for you. Another great strategy is checking sales in flyers. They call them the little news uh, sales papers that come to your home or that come to your email, right? If you're signed up at any of the grocery store loyalty um, programs, um, then those are great ways to find out about what's on sale that week that can also then drive that meal plan for the week or your plan for that week, right? And the beautiful thing about that, when you are a little bit open, right, to shopping in a way that might be influenced by what's on sale, you actually are giving your body the opportunity to eat a wider variety of things, right? So do that as often as you can. Places like dollar stores, discount grocers, like Mother's Nutrition Center, Food for Less, Grocery Outlet, are also very affordable places to find food within the San Bernardino area. And I noticed that I have missed some comments. Let me see. Um, so Jessica shared that I normally cook brown rice with a little chicken broth. Would this take away from the nutrients? No, not at all. Actually, what you're getting is you're enhancing that. You're enhancing it with additional flavor, which is the same way that I like to cook brown rice. And that's the same that goes for anything, right? Using anything that requires water, you can switch up and use chicken broth for a little bit of extra flavor and nutrients. So that's um, definitely a great tip. And general healthy moms, that's such a good idea to do half and half. I recently saw a post about adding half quinoa to rice to incorporate protein for kids that love rice. I'm hoping to try that soon. So let me tell you, last week I did that for the first time with the kiddos because I used to make quinoa for my husband and I, and then the rice for the kids. And I tried it, and yes, they all gave me the look, right, as if what's happening here. But they actually really enjoyed it because it was just a little bit of a different texture. It wasn't me giving them a full plate of quinoa. It was them getting almost like if you've seen a wild rice pack, right? There's all these different colors and different textures of rice all together. um, I joke with them that this was more of an experience, right? Because you had those different textures all in one. So definitely try it and let me know how that goes. Um, Natasha, I can never cook quinoa properly. For some reason, it hates me. LOL. So there are different types of quinoa I have learned because there was one that I typically have success with it because it's actually probably one of the simpler grains to cook, at least for me, because I have a lot of things going on. Um, I have burned a few things from time to time, right? Leaving it on the stove. But the beautiful thing about quinoa is you want to rinse it, right, to remove any um, kids call it dust, right? Remove the extra little grains that are the extra things that are there. You want to rinse it and um, get your water boiling, turn off the fire, and leave the top on. And just let it, that's the way, I mean, you just let it cook for the amount of time that's on the packaging. So it's actually to try it again. I challenge you to try it again. Um, because I had a few fails and now it's like, oh, yeah, pretty simple. You can, if you use a rice cooker for your rice, you can absolutely use that for your quinoa as well. Um, Seffi is at the stage, she wants to snack constantly. So she says, I'm hungry all day. So I always wonder if I'm feeding her enough, too much, or what snacks are going to be filling, but also taste good for a 4-year-old. Okay, so yeah, we're going to get into that. I have a 4-year-old as well. And so, yes, she loves to, and sometimes it's not, I realize with her, it's not even necessarily food that she wants, you know, but yes, we'll get into that. I recently learned that frozen fruit and veggies are more nutrient dense. So yeah, so we're gonna actually, yeah, that's on this slide as well, because what we know, it used to be considered by a lot of people as being subpar, right? Choosing frozen fruits and vegetables. But what we know is that those fruits and vegetables have been flash frozen at its highest nutrient count. So if you think about it from that perspective, you're getting it year round, right? Access to fruit that is at its prime and veggies that are at their prime. So absolutely. Um, and going back to for you, Natasha, Seffi's snack option. I don't know, try it with her, but like my 4-year-old loves frozen peas. So she'll just ask for a bowl of frozen peas, right? Straight from the freezer. So talk about um, no prep needed. So thank you. I love the questions and the comments. So yeah, so I want to stress along with the things we've already discussed, the benefits of buying in bulk. And that might look like buying dried beans in bulk, rice, oats, frozen vegetables. We talk about fruits. They're great items to purchase in bulk, but we also, from a perspective of saving money, right? Because we're talking about here, and being smart with our resources. We want to buy in bulk of the things that we actually use, right? Just because it's on sale, if you're not going to be open to using it, then don't buy it, right? We have that happens too, where things can go to the freezer and die, or go to the cupboard and die, and we don't want that. That's not the best use of our resources. Shopping seasonally and at farmers markets are great. That's another way to get that in-season produce. It's typically cheaper and fresher. Things like berries, corn, zucchini, and our farmers market right now, if you have WIC and CalFresh benefits, there's a beautiful, when you go to your farmers market, there are stands that will have designated signs to indicate that they do accept WIC and CalFresh, which is great. A way to get, the freshest options. We talked about not being afraid of frozen foods because they're picked at peak ripeness and they're nutritionally comparable to fresh, but sometimes even better, as we already mentioned. Frozen fruits are great for smoothies, soups. Your veggies will be good for soups and stir fries. And I always say, this is a great way to take for a lot of families, very much a staple, which is ramen, those little packets of ramen that families have. Instead of just eating it like that, the way, by way of following the directions, why not go into the freezer, get some of the frozen veggies, or into the fridge and pull out some of your leftover vegetables and to elevate that bowl of ramen. And lastly, the benefits of shopping the perimeter of the store. So the outer edges of every grocery store is designed to have more of your whole foods, right? The less processed things. So if you start by prioritizing shopping from the perimeter of the store, you will avoid a lot of the processed, packaged, and less nutritious foods. Perfect. And so the third tip, I guess, is to embrace the power of pantry staples on this journey to nourish yourself, right? A well-stocked pantry means that you can throw together a nutritious meal even when the fridge is low, right? These are going to be staples that are affordable, shelf stable, nutritionally powerful. Things like dried beans and lentils. They're incredibly cheap per serving, right? So they're high in protein and fiber and very filling. You can have them, and this is the thing. I have a love-hate relationship with social media, but if you looked at the amount of recipes that I have saved on social media, then you would think that I had an absolute love of social media, because there are lots of accounts that will give you very simple recipes that will bring these pantry staples to life. And so I have actually started, and I did this a while ago, that's why I have so many, started to save those by category so that when it's time to, hey, I need to make beans today or lentils today, what can I do with it? Or if I'm preparing, right, going back to that grocery store, making my grocery list, and I know I have lentils in the cabinet, then I want to go and say, okay, what am I going to do this week? What can I do this week with what I already have? What can I make this week with what I already have on hand? And social media is great for that. But dried beans, lentils, high in protein, high in fiber, very filling. Ways that I've used them, I use it for soups, stews, burritos, rice dishes. This tomorrow, I'm trying a lentil burger, so it looks really good. I've tried other recipes from this influencer, so I'm hoping to be quite pleased. But I encourage families to learn to cook these items because it's such a life skill and a budget saver. Okay. Other amazing staples would be your rice. We've talked about a little bit already. Oats. Those are also two of the most affordable, versatile carbs that you can get, right? Those are those complex carbs that are not naked, right? They come with the protein. They come packaged with that protein and that fiber. So brown rice and oats add fiber and nutrients. You can make lots of breakfasts. There are oatmeal bars that you can make for your family, and that can also be a healthy snack when everyone needs a little bit of a snack. Oats can be used in smoothies, right, to give you again some of that extra support in the area of balancing out maybe some of the natural sugar in the fruit, right, in your smoothie. There's so many ways that we can use these staples. Canned tomatoes is another base meal that can be used for so many different to create so many different meals, right? I encourage families to consider the low sodium option because typically everything that we're using has a lot of sodium, right? You can always, add salt to taste. And canned tomatoes stretch, right? Along with the beans and the meat. So it's something that you can use to make chilies. You can put it into soups, right? We talked about rice and also enhance the flavor of rice using those canned tomatoes. Whole wheat pasta is often the exact same price as regular pasta, but you're getting more nutrients, more fiber, family-friendly quick meal option. This also can be handled or incorporated into your family the same way we talked about incorporating that quinoa, right? A half and half or 1/4, 3/4, right? Because there is a little bit, because of the extra fiber that's present in the whole wheat pasta, tends to be a little bit firmer tends to take, as my children have said before, a little bit more time to chew, but that's the point, right? Also in our body, it takes a little bit more time to break down, which is a great benefit to our family or to our bodies and our overall health. Canned tuna, canned fish is a great source of protein, omega-3 fatty acids, things like tuna, sardines, salmon, packed in water makes salmon, regular access to salmon more affordable. It's very high in proteins, like we mentioned. That's going to support our brain health, our mood, especially important for our postpartum mothers. And I encourage families to build their pantry gradually, right? Buying one or two staples each shopping trip until they have a solid foundation. And um, that may be motivated, right? What you purchase might be motivated by what's on sale, right? It might be nice if you need a can of tomatoes, maybe you'll get two, right? When you can, just so you'll have that extra thing. And start to be creative, right? With making meals, what you have on hand. And then I wanted to like take another little bit of a more deeper dive into protein, right? Because protein, again, is so important for us. It's essential for our energy, our healing, our muscles, hormones, growth, right? Especially, during our pregnancy, our postpartum phases, and just for us in general with trying to, maintain our weight and just have that holistic focus on optimal health. But it is probably one of the more expensive things that we're purchasing if we're only considering like your typical proteins, right? So I always encourage, this is where maybe people need to stretch a little bit too, in terms of understanding that there are lots of affordable protein sources that may not be what you think of first, right? Things like eggs, right? I know we went through this period of time when eggs were not affordable at all. And so a lot of times, I noticed for me in talking with families and just saying things online, a lot of people pivoted during that time to new sources of protein. So out of such a stressful time for a lot of families, we're given the opportunity to be creative. And so eggs is one of the most nutrient dense foods available. You have, protein. It offers you healthy fats, vitamins, minerals. It's very budget friendly now, especially if you buy them by the dozen when they're on sale. Again, chicken. Thinking of chicken, your thighs and your drumsticks are gonna be cheaper than your chicken breasts, and a lot of people find them much more flavorful, right? Because of that extra fat that's there. And like I mentioned earlier, you do have a slight increase in iron as well, which is great because a lot of us also are, uh, run low on our iron stores. So it's great to have that as an option, right? If you can't or you don't want to have chicken breasts, or if you're like me, sometimes my chicken breasts, I don't know, I cook them too long and they're just not enjoyable, but it's always great in a salad. So be open, right? But these are these chicken sources. They're great for baking, stewing, slow cooking. Um, Tofu is another, if you eat soy or if you're open to trying soy, very affordable, very neutral in flavor. They take on the seasoning of whatever you put on them, right? And is considered a complete plant protein. So, and it's very, very affordable. So a lot of families have started incorporating tofu into their meals. And tofu, again, something I have an entire little save folder of tofu meals and dishes that I've gotten from people on social media that sometimes I modify it based on what I have, right? But the idea, it blows your mind, right? To know you can have in the mornings a tofu scramble versus like scrambled eggs, right? And it does take what it comes down to, because tofu has a very neutral flavor itself. It's going to be all about what you season the tofu with, right? So if you want that barbecue flavor, then you're gonna need that those barbecue seasonings, the barbecue sauce, right? If you want to make the scrambled eggs, there's certain seasonings that, particular black salt that you can find. Um, it's not available everywhere, but we find it online, and it has when you put it on tofu, it just tastes like eggs. It's so funny. So I don't know. So experiment, right? This is all about um making it fun. It's an adventure. And so this is tofu is definitely something that I like for families to consider. I'll get to the comment in just a second. And then canned beans and lentils, excellent plant-based proteins, incredibly cheap. You have so many so many beans to choose from: black beans, pinto beans, chickpeas, right? Red lentils. We'll talk about this in a little bit too, but going back to Natasha, your question about snacking, another thing that we do here often is take a can of chickpeas, season them up, whatever your favorite seasoning are, put them in the oven or the air fryer until they're crispy, and that's a great snack. A high protein snack, right? That's crunchy and the girls really love it. So that's another great way to experiment with something that is definitely affordable and you can have on hand. You can buy dried chickpeas and rehydrate them. It's a different process, but be open, be curious is what I encourage you to do. And then we have peanut butter or nut butter is what I really should have said, because you can have cashew butter, you can have almond butter, right? So there's lots of different butters, but peanut butter is the one most of us are we know intimately, right? And it's a good source of protein. It's affordable. Incorporating peanut butter into your oatmeal, right, is a great way to add some additional fat, some additional protein to your oatmeal, right? And it gives a really, really yummy flavor. And most people don't think about that. But you want to choose, when it comes to peanut butter, choose natural varieties as often as possible. Looking at ingredient lists is super important, just so you kind of know when you have to choose between two, which one has the least amount of ingredients will give you kind of the more higher quality version. So for postpartum and breastfeeding moms specifically, again, protein is king. It supports breast repair, or tissue repair, breast milk production, and energy, which is so important during that phase. And then when we get further along in our pace of life, right, we need to also be considering these protein sources. And now let's see, we had a comment. I was so happy to learn that because now I have a lot of fruits and veggies that don't go bad so quickly. Yes, WIC will substitute tofu. Yeah, thank you for reminding me about that. And yeah, so that is a great way. WIC will substitute tofu if you let them know if that's your source of protein that you want. It's a great way to experiment. And yeah, thanks so much for adding to our conversation today. Uh-oh. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this actually ties into what you just mentioned and you just shared about making the most of fruits and vegetables, right? It's about the goal is buying what we need, but not wasting or losing, right, to things dying off either the fridge or the cupboard. So I encourage my families to focus on seasonal produce. They tend to be cheaper, they tend to be tastier. Buying whole produce, buying pre-cut produce, they're going to charge you, right? So you want to take that extra time, cut up your produce, using scraps, saving vegetable scraps that you aren't going to cook at the time, putting it in a freezer bag. You can take those those vegetables and boil them in water and make a yummy broth, like a slow simmer, and you can make your own veggie broth. Overripe fruit can be saved for smoothies can be incorporated into baked goods, can be incorporated into, we do that with our oatmeals. Again, if it's a banana that has just so ripe that people aren't that comfortable with it, then I will put it in smoothie. I mean, I would put it in a smoothie and I would put it in our oatmeal, right? Um, Frozen options we already talked about. I'm a huge fan of growing what you can, right? Even if it's a little pot with an herb, um, I encourage you to do that. And so here I have just a quick little, a couple of examples of simple and nutrient-rich meal ideas. So again, we're looking at trying to get as much nutrients in our meals as possible. Things like oatmeal with fruit, sprinkling it with nuts and seeds, right, would be a great breakfast. Scrambling eggs with whole wheat toast, yogurt with granola and berries. A nice lunch might be leftovers from dinner, bean and cheese burritos, tuna salad sandwich on whole wheat bread, vegetable soup with whole grain crackers. A nice dinner might be lentil soup with bread, chicken and vegetable stir fry, pasta with tomato sauce or some pureed tomatoes from your cupboard or your pantry, and beans, baked chicken, and roasted vegetables. So I encourage families to not overthink it, right? The goal is, to just a starting point to feed yourself nutrient-rich foods, and the goal is to be inspired and not about perfection. And so the last thing I want to talk a little bit about is snacking, right? Because snacking often gets a bad reputation, but well-chosen snacks help us stabilize our blood sugar, help us prevent overeating at meals, and keep our energy and mood steady throughout the day. And that's super important for young children as well as busy parents, right? One of the big takeaways today I hope you remember is protein can also help with, again, slowing that digestion, right? Reducing those blood sugar spikes and dips. So pairing your snack with a protein is going to help you with that. That is like my golden tip for today. This will slow down, break down, and stabilize blood sugar, helping you feel fuller longer. So fruits are a great snack, right? Pairing that with like a cheese stick, right? Being the protein. Vegetables, carrot sticks, cucumber slices, bell pepper sticks. Pairing that with like hummus, right? Or Greek yogurt, right? Which is also a protein source that maybe has some herbs and spices in it, right? Make your own quote unquote healthy ranch dressing. Air pop popcorn, which is a great whole grain snack. Hard boiled eggs, which are super portable and packed with protein. And for families that, have children that are coming home from school super hungry, having as many of these available for them to grab is great, right? Just takes the edge off a little bit. And so just the key takeaways for me, that I want to pass on to you today, we talked about a lot of different things, is the benefits of choosing a variety of foods and beverages to enjoy, to build your own healthy eating guide, right? There's not one way to do this thing right? The goal is to give our bodies a wide range of foods, fruits, vegetables, grains, dairy, protein, and using that healthy, balanced plate visual is going to be a great guide for you. And then I included talked a little bit about that. I included a few resources, and I will send out with my survey. If you registered, if you didn't register, you could just pop your email into the chat, and I'll make sure you get a copy of the survey as well as resources, okay? Because again, we talked about WIC, SNAP, CalFresh provides a benefit monthly for those that are eligible that can be used towards purchasing food. Medically tailored meals are something that's also available through Medi-Cal and some private insurance carriers for those that have chronic conditions, right? Because again, insurance companies are understanding that yes, we're talking about this from a perspective of prevention, but even if we have a chronic condition, it's better managed with nutrient-rich foods, right? And so there is a benefit that is available through a lot of health insurances, including Medi-Cal, IEHP. Second Chance in the High Desert is an amazing resource for fruits and vegetables and food to kind of fill the gaps. Farmers Market, Grocery Outlet, Food for Less, Mother's Nutritional Centers, and local farms. Oh, and I realize there's a typo here. In my the email, I'll include the links. There's two local farms that we know of in San Bernardino County that have free produce days for families. And so that's another great way to get some of that prime fruits and vegetables for free to add to your cupboards and your fridges. And then I have two QR codes here that you can scan. One is a produce guide offered by the USDA that kind of gives you an idea annually what foods are in season where, to kind of guide you if you're looking for in-season fruit and vegetables. And then a great menu, a recipe guide. And I'll include that also in our follow-up email. Okay. And so we have a little bit of time left, but I just want to thank you so much for being here, for everything you're doing. If you are one of the professionals in the community, if you're doing for your families in the community, and for you just showing up as someone, in charge of your family's nutrition. I just thank you for what you're doing to learn as much as you can to optimize your health as well as their health. And I hope today that you have learned a few things that you might want to implement, get curious about maybe a few new things to try. And so in the chat, can you go ahead and drop maybe one practical tip that you will take and implement this week or next week? I would love to now open it up to any questions and to connect a little bit since we're done with the presentation. And then just to remind you that Healthy Start San Bernardino is a resource available to the community. And what we do as care coordinators in our monthly check-ins with our families, we are talking to them about nutrition, talking to them about connecting with resources in the community where they are able to get their needs met. So think of us, and let me stop sharing. Any question? Oh, I have a few questions in the chat. Okay, let's see. This was amazing. Thank you so much, y'all. Thank you, Jessica. This was super insightful. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you for dropping our link in the chat. General Healthy Mom. 5 kids, always learning. I got the takeaway to remember to shop deals. Yes, awesome. So yes, you know what it's like because I have 4. So it's a lot of meals and snacks, a lot of what's for dinner. I'm hungry, a lot of that, all of that. So I, I'm with you, and, just any small thing, like I said, and if the beautiful thing about it, I'd say to take it from a perspective of not adding any extra stress, it's those little things of like looking at what you have and just telling everybody, we're on a journey. Every time I try to introduce something new, the kids, I have some teenagers, so they do give me a little bit of a hard time sometimes. I tell them, listen, it's nutrition. This is good stuff, okay? So try it. You never know you're going to like it, because reality is our palate changes, right? The more we're exposed to something, our tastes change. So, and that's just the reality. So, Jessica, yes, I see your hand.
Hey, Amina. I was going to put this in the chat, but it's too much. So I wanted to, first of all, say this was amazing. This was so amazing, and great reminders. Thank you. But I had a question. This is personal. I have 2 boys. Marlon is 12, going on like 17, and Ron is 10, going on 15, right? Just the way they eat. And so I'm so honestly, I'm so nervous about this summer with them being home. Do you have any practical tips on keeping them full while providing them with nutritionist foods? I guess that would be my question because they're always hungry. So I feel like I'm
Yes.
constantly, they go through everything. And
Yep.
yeah, so that was my question.
Thank you. Great question. And actually, General Healthy Mom put in there a reminder, thank you for that, is that a lot of schools do free meals for pickup during the summer. So definitely look for that through your district because absolutely, it feels like you can never have enough food, right, for them. But this is where I have to have this conversation with my kiddos too, because they like to come and do the drive. I call it the drive through, right? They drive through the kitchen, grab something and go. But sometimes making sure we have this conversation on a smaller level with them about balance, right? They're a little younger, yours are a little younger than mine, but just eating a carb, for example, because that's my kids go to. They'll just go to a carb, which I get it, right? It feels good, it tastes good, it's quick. But pairing that with an apple, right? So if you want to get those veggie chips that you love, right, from the cabinet, then get that, but I need you to get that with something else, right? Because that's what's happening is we're having these quick meals that are not rooted enough in protein and fiber to keep us full because those are two things that will slow down that production, right? So all their fun things that they love they can have in moderation, but they also must pair it with something else. And so that's a rule that we have. I mean, of course, they probably, I can't see everything, right? But I can tell by their behavior sometimes and the amount of requests that they have not been trying to balance their meals. So, putting together what some moms will do is put together, little snack packs, like things in the fridge that are like, you know, something they can grab and go with some cheese sticks, right? Some protein. So looking back at, and I'll put this in the email too to everyone, just a little cheat sheet of some proteins and that are great to pair with our meals, right? Especially the snacks, because snacking is tricky. So I have a whole list of like simple snack ideas that I can include too. So if you did not register, please drop your email in the chat and we can send that out to you. But that's what I would say, Jessica, is just consider having a conversation with them, explaining to them, um, that we don't want to be eating out of house and home, right? I have this every summer, but it's the balancing act. And so I feel like having these kind of discussions with our kiddos, um, this is something that's going to take them much further in life, right? Is to understand this concept now. They're boys, they're growing, and so we do need to feed them, but it's maximizing, right? So if they're having my girls love ramen, then okay, we're gonna have ramen, but guess what? Some of that leftover chicken in the fridge, we're gonna warm it up, we're gonna put it in our ramen, we're gonna add some of the veggies, because again, you're bulking up that meal with the two most important things, right? The protein and then the fiber. And those are the things that are key to making them feel full. So I hope that helps.
Yes. Thank you so much. I love that. And the boys, they love ramen. They're always on
Yes.
online trying to do
Yep.
the newest trend with
Yes.
the ramen. So
Yep.
I
Yep.
appreciate that. Thank you, Amina.
No problem. Okay. If there's no other questions, I will give you guys back the rest of your day. And just thank you so much for joining me today.